Before we continue with the video, if you like what I'm doing here on this channel, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel a lot. Anyway, let's get back to the video. Welcome back to another episode of my Explore Lyra video series. In this episode, I thought we could take a bit of a closer look to changing some of the experience parameters that we have available to us to see what we can manage to do with an experience. So what we have here currently is me running Unreal Engine version 5.02. I have created a simple new blank map, just like I showed in the previous video showing how you can create new levels. And in it we only have the specific game mode or experience of the shooter game, which means that if we start we get put into place with some pawns here of AI. And in addition to that we also have a nav mesh so that they can navigate around this area here essentially. So starting off, we go to plugins and we go to shooter core content and we have a folder called experiences. This is where we found out that we could find some of the experiences that are available in the Exploring Lyra episode 1. In here we have the game mode elimination that we currently have in here. So let's toy around a little bit with this. So starting off, I think I would recommend that any and all assets that you change, you probably want to make a duplicate out of it, and that way you can manipulate the duplicate without having a destructive change on whatever assets you had to begin with. So if we make a duplicate here, we can say this is our test version, and we can then replace the shooter game over here with our test version. So we have the test version here now. Opening up the test version, we get to, let's just change the editor settings here so that we start off our windows in the main window like so. So in here we have the experience. Let's open up all of the different collapsed brackets so that we can see what is actually being maintained in the experience itself, so we can go through and see what we have the ability to change. Like we discovered in the previous episode, we found out that Lyra as a whole is a very modular project. There's a lot of sort of plug and play mentality to a lot of things. It's sort of like inserting puzzle pieces into different slots, and the experiences are no different for that. In here we can see we have a default pawn data asset, which is the hero data shooter game. So here you can change information for that. We can also see that we are being granted some action sets here for this specific experience, which is shared input, standard component, standard HUD, and accolades, which essentially means achievements. So we encountered some of this a little bit in previous episodes. Moving on, we also have groupings for actions. And here we can see that we are apparently being granted the ability set of elimination and the different abilities that is contained within that data asset. We also have a grouping of components. So this was an ability list, and here we have some component lists. We can see that they consist of an actor class, which is where the component will be belonging to, and we can see the specific component that's being used here. So we have a game state and a deathmatch scoring, for example. We also have a setting for client component and server component, meaning if you want it to execute on a client or a server. So you can have it on either of these or both or none. None probably isn't that useful. Moving on, we also have the game state again here with a music manager. We have the game state with a shooter bot spawner. We have the game state with a team setup, 2 teams. We have it with a game state and team spawning rules. We also have a controller and pick random character. This one we encountered in the episode of changing characters. And down here lastly we have a widget class, which is the score widget elimination, which we touched upon briefly in the UI episode. So let's play around with these a little bit and see what is actually building up the gameplay experience. So let's start with the shooter bot spawner, for example. So let's browse to that asset. We can see here what that looks like. So here we have an asset which has some different settings available to it. We can see that this seems to be the core for this blueprint. And again, if you want to focus on the blueprints in the project, the naming convention that I have chosen for the Lyra project is the prefix B underscore. Me personally, I use the BP underscore to denote my blueprints, but this is what they have chosen for this project. Inside of this blueprint, we can see that this works as sort of a config file. And we can see that we have, among other things, the number of bots to create. So if we were to make a duplicate out of this one, so we can just have one ourselves, and we'll name this one test as well. We'll open up the test one and close the bot spawner one. Then we can go to our elimination test here and change the bot spawner to be our bot spawner test. Like so. So now we can change around here and see how that will affect our gameplay. So we can see the number of bots being spawned. So 3 is default. So if we were to add 4, for example, I'm going to assume that that means we will have 4. Actually, that's not ideal. Let's actually put in some starting points here so we can start on the map regularly. So might be a good time to tell you that you can go here and add new objects, and typing in Lyra, you'll get some of the Lyra specific assets that are available. So among them you have a player start, so we can put a few player starts in here. So we have a few different ones to spawn from, and then when we play we get spawned, and this is what we see. So we see 2 blue, we see 2 red, so that seems to correlate with what we were expecting essentially. So the number of AIs you can change here if you want to have more or less of them. We also have here random bot names, so these will be the names that will be chosen for the different AIs that are spawned. And that means that if we wanted to have a different source than an array here, we would, if we were to have, for example, a data table, this is where we could be filling that information if we wanted to. In addition to that, we can also say that we have an AI controller here as default for the bots to use. And this one looks like the controller that we came across when we were doing the AI episode. It seems to be doing some basic logic, starting, waiting for the experience to be ready, running a behavior tree. So here we will have the behavior tree, Lyra shooter bot. Fairly sure that's the one we went through in the AI episode if you want to watch that. And it then proceeds to have an event bound so that it can listen to when the character dies and then stop its logic and clear some values, it seems here. And then it also has some logic on when the character of the bot is possessed. And we also have apparently launching or executing the event over here where we saw up here on that started when a unpossess happens for an AI character. So this is very basic. It looks pretty straightforward. So if you wanted to change your AI logic for this part of the project, then you could just create a different AI controller and have that one be replaced in here. Or if you wanted to, you could go in here and change the BT asset, so your behavior tree, to be a different behavior tree if you have a different behavior tree for your AI that you wanted to follow instead. So there are a few different ways you can approach altering this. And that seems to be pretty much everything that might be specific to this. The other settings here look as if they are generic and might be common across all different components possibly. So let's compile and save for now. We close this down and let's take a look at the next part. So next we have a component class called team setup to teams. Let's go look at that one. So opening this one up, I do see some similarities between this and the other component. The differentiating parts here seem to be this area that is grouped in teams. And it seems like we have the possibility here to create multiple teams as we want and then assign different data assets to them. And it seems like we even have a few different data assets to choose from here. So if we go and navigate to one of the data assets, we can see what it consists of. And it seems to be mostly just different colors to be used for, I'm gonna assume, the character. So if you wanted to, you could create additional data assets here for other colors if you wanted to, and alter the ones that are already here if you want to do that as well. And this would make me believe that we can also add teams here. So this is probably an identifier of some sort for the different teams. So setting a new one would probably be fine there. And here we can choose a different color, maybe the yellow one. And I'm gonna assume that we are ready to have an additional team member spawn. And there we see we have a yellow one. However, we seem to be getting a lot of warning messages here. It's complaining about nameplate, it looked like, and we get a runtime error. Let's escape out and see what that error was all about. So we seem to be getting an access none error appearing here, and it is related to setting a scalar parameter value for something in the widget nameplate. So this is probably related to what we saw about the warnings as well, that was appearing in the yellow text. So let's go check what this is all about. So inside here we have the set scalar parameter value, which means that if we get an access none, this means that this value is none, which might mean that this value is none. So let's actually set a breakpoint here and see what we can encounter. So starting off, we, to begin with, have a value over here. And the next player has a value. And the third player and the fourth player. Everything seems fine so far. Fifth player and an instance. So everything seems fine so far. So it's possibly something that is being changed, not, or a problem that's not being encountered at the start, but rather later on. So everything looks okay. Not running into any errors so far. We're having references for each of these different times that we're checking. Here, however, we have run into a widget tree health here, but the dynamic material is returned 0 here. Okay. So, if we're not getting a material here, let's see if we can find where health is being used. Let's find references for the health. We seem to be using it in 2 different places. This place and set team visuals. So this seems to be the only other place. Here we seem to have some code that is not being used. Here we have something that mentions a team ID. Blue team health bar, red team health bar. So since we added a new team, this is probably the problem area. We'll add another index here. And let's go to, let's see, is it this file? So blue team health bar, let's make a duplicate out of this one. And let's rename it from blue to yellow. So we have one for our yellow team. Then let's open that up and see what that looks like. So it's a material instance which seems to be having some colors and some different settings for the material. Let's change the colors to something yellow, like so. And let's close that down. And let's put the yellow in here. So that should fix that issue, I think. Although it seems like we have more team IDs here, so let's add another one here. Yet another one over here. Let's look for this variable and see where it appears. So find references. We have setting of team ID, which is done over here. From this node over here in a sequence of the initialized nameplates, which is what we encountered as the potential problem for when we changed to have a third team. It is also being used over here, which we have expanded to a third team. Over here, where we have a third team. Over here, is that the same? It's not the same. This is not what we have expanded. Let's expand this one as well. So what does this one do? Blue Team Mini. Let's look at what that is. Blue Team Mini. Let's duplicate that as well. And let's make a Yellow Team Mini. So we seem to have some sort of icon probably representing the team in some way or shape. It could be what is used for the scoreboard possibly. Let's make it yellow so that we can see if it appears, that it will appear in the correct colors. Close that down and we'll type in yellow and mini. There we go, and we have that one done. So let's see here, we have gone to this place, this place, this place, and this place, and those are the 4 places. Okay, so it seems like we have managed to sort these out. Let's see if this works better now when we play. So no yellow text, that seems promising at least. And maybe we have fixed the issues now. And I spoke too soon. So what was that? That looked like something elimination feed, if I had... Yeah, so it's talking about a W_eliminations. It seems to be a widget. So let's stop this and let's go to our plugin folder. Or let's search from all and go search for elimination. That's not how you spell elimination. No. Alright, I'm still spelling it wrong. Elimination. And it said something about feed also. Feed entry, I think it said. Let's double check that. I'm suspecting it has something to do with the yellow player. It could be that whenever the yellow player kills something or gets killed. Okay, so elimination feed entry widget is what it's saying. Okay, so it is this one then. Let's open this one up and see what we find. So it's a widget that shows the attacker, so the person who kills something, a icon for what it killed it with, and whoever it attacked or killed, essentially, I'm going to assume. Let's see if we can look at the graph and find something. So there are team IDs here just like before. Let's find the references for those. So we're setting an attacker and an attackee team ID over here on list item object set. And then we're setting team colors. That might be an issue, possibly. Nothing else interesting is happening here. Let's go see where the next reference is. We're running into another select, which is taking into consideration only 2 teams, so let's expand that. It is, however, using it for a scalar parameter value. So this might not work perfectly when it comes to the colors then, because this might be a material that's only set up to deal with 2 teams possibly, but we'll see. We have another select over here, let's expand that one. And the same thing over here it seems, and lastly the same thing again. So are these the... So these are the 2 occurrences of the attacker team ID. Let's check the attackee team as well when we're here. So we have a set which is the one we saw earlier, and we have a get, which is this one. So this might be enough. Let's check and see what it's like. So everything starts okay. Let's see if we can get the yellow player killed maybe. And that didn't cause any problems at least. And so it seems like we are now able to both kill and be killed by the yellow player. So we seem to have solved those initial entries that appeared. So it might be that the game is a little bit too rigidly configured around two teams initially, so there might be some changes that needs to be done. However, I did notice that in the kill feed it didn't show up as yellow, it showed up as, I believe it was red. So it might be that if you wanted to have it the proper color, you probably have to alter how the materials are being shown so that you can have multiple colors if you want to have multiple teams as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's keep going and see if we find something else that's interesting. So this was this part. I did not follow my own advice here. I didn't create a duplicate of this one. You probably should do that if you don't want to mess around like I did. But yeah, so now we know that the team setup here keeps track of both things like colors and things of that nature. Let's see if the team spawning rules has something interesting. And here I don't actually see anything that's deviating from the standard variables of the other components. So I'm not entirely sure. Perhaps tags is new, but it seems like it doesn't use it in this case. So I guess we'll move on to the next one. And next we have a pick random character, which we ran into in a previous episode. So I guess that might be a good place to stop for now. I hope that my approach of trying to change around the settings gives you some insight into how you can approach creating your own differing parameters and changing values up to accommodate whatever you're looking for, or hopefully maybe the debugging that we went through here to try and get things to work is something that you find useful if you run into issues yourself when you're changing things around inside of Lyra. Anyway, that's all for now. Keep on learning. Take care.